When I first came to this city, I thought it would give me freedom. I believed that if I worked hard, I could build a small and peaceful life for myself. But in Bombay, peace is not easy to find. Every street has noise. Every corner has people fighting to survive. Sometimes I think the city eats the weak and forgets their names. My name is Dina Dalal. I was born into a good family, but money disappears faster than love. My father was a doctor, respected and kind, but he died when I was still a young girl. My mother was not strong after that. I remember her sitting by the window each evening, staring at the sea, as if she was waiting for my father to return. I tried to be brave, but the house became colder after his death. When I grew older, my brother Nuswan decided that he was now the head of the family. He was not cruel, but he liked control. He said I must stop my studies and stay home to learn how to be a proper wife. I wanted to learn more, to finish my education, to be free. But in those days, girls like me were not expected to think about freedom. We were expected to marry well and keep the house clean. For many years, I lived like that, between my brother's orders and my mother's sadness. I cooked, I cleaned, and I read books when no one was watching. Then one day I met Rustam. He was gentle and laughed easily. He loved to ride his bicycle by the sea. He did not speak like other men. He listened. That made me feel alive again. We married quietly, and for the first time, I thought life could be kind. But happiness has a short life. 3 years after our wedding, Rustam was killed in a road accident. He had gone out one evening to buy ice cream for me. He never came back. A man on a motorbike hit him and rode away. I remember the sound of the bell at the door that night, the way my hands shook when the policeman said my husband's name. After that, the house became silent again. I stopped hearing my own laughter. My brother wanted me to return to his house. He said a widow cannot live alone. I told him I could manage. He said I was foolish. But I did not want to be someone's burden. I wanted to survive on my own, even if it meant sewing clothes by hand. So I began to take small tailoring jobs for local shops. I sat by the window each morning with my sewing machine, my feet moving fast, my eyes tired by evening. I earned little, but it was mine. Years passed like that. I lived alone in a small flat in an old building. The walls were cracked and the lights often failed, but it was my space. My independence was thin and fragile, like the fabric I worked with, but I held it close. I learned to fix my own roof when the rain came, to argue with the landlord when he increased the rent, and to smile politely at the neighbors who asked too many questions. Then the shopkeeper I worked for said he would stop giving me work. Machines in the factory were faster, he said, and cheaper too. I looked around my flat and thought of what to do. I needed money for rent, food, and medicine for my weak eyes. That is when I decided to turn my home into a small workshop. I would hire tailors and take orders myself. It was a risk, but I had no choice. Finding good workers was not easy. Many men did not want to work for a woman. They said I was proud, that I paid little, that my house was too small. One day, a friend introduced me to two tailors named Ishvar and Omprakash. They had worked for a factory that was destroyed by fire. They were kind and quiet, and their hands were quick with a needle. I decided to take the risk and hire them. The first day they came, they looked around my tiny living room and smiled politely. They spread the cloth on the floor and began to sew. The sound of their machines filled the room, and for the first time in years, the silence of my house broke. It felt strange to share my space with others, but it also felt less lonely. I cooked tea for them, and we ate small lunches together. They told me stories about their village, their families, and the years they spent learning their work. They were from a small town far away. They had lived through hunger, illness, and cruelty because of their caste. They never complained, but I could see the weight they carried. Their backs were bent, not from age, but from years of trying to survive. Sometimes, when I watched them sewing, I felt both proud and sad. Proud because they worked with care, and sad because life had given them so little. Later, another person entered my life. A student named Manik came to rent my small back room. His parents lived in the mountains, and they wanted him to study in the city. He was quiet and polite. He studied refrigeration and often carried heavy books. When he first came, I thought he would be like the other tenants who left after a few months. But he stayed longer, and soon he became part of the small rhythm of our days. Every morning, I would open the curtains and see the tailors at their work, and Manik reading near the window. There was noise, but it was a peaceful kind of noise. I cooked a little extra food each day, and sometimes we all ate together. It was strange how life had changed. For years I had guarded my independence like a secret, but now I found myself enjoying the company of these men who shared my space. Still, I worried. The city was changing fast. People whispered about protests, arrests, and the government's new rules. There were rumors of houses being destroyed and people taken away at night. The newspapers spoke of the emergency, a word that sounded heavy and uncertain. I did not understand politics, but I understood fear. I saw policemen beating poor men in the street, and I heard of workers disappearing after speaking against their bosses. In our small flat, we tried to keep life steady. The tailors worked from morning till night, and I kept track of the orders. Manik studied hard and sometimes helped me with small repairs. But outside our door, the city grew harder each day. Prices rose, jobs disappeared, and the poor became invisible. One afternoon, I looked out the window and saw a group of beggars being forced into a truck. They said it was for cleaning the streets. I closed the window and felt my stomach turn. That night, when I went to sleep, I listened to the sound of the sewing machines in my head. It was like a song that kept us alive. Each stitch meant hope. Each piece of cloth meant another day of survival. I was still afraid, but I also felt proud. In a city full of lies and loss, our small home had become something honest. It was a place where broken people found a reason to wake up each morning. Sometimes I remembered Rustam and wondered what he would think if he saw me now. He had always said I was stronger than I believed. Maybe he was right. Maybe strength is not about fighting loudly. Maybe it is about holding on quietly when the world wants to push you down. I fell asleep with that thought, and in the morning, I opened the door to another long day of work, another day of balance between fear and faith. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share, and let me know in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now, let's continue. Morning always arrived with the same sounds. The soft hum of the sewing machines, the clatter of cups in the kitchen, the noise of the street vendors outside. Life in my small flat had become regular, almost peaceful. It was not an easy peace, but it was the kind that people build when they have no other choice. Ishvar and Om came early each day. They sat on the floor and arranged their cloth neatly. I watched them as I made tea. Their hands moved fast, almost like they were dancing with the fabric. Sometimes I thought their stitches held more patience than words ever could. I had worked alone for so long that I forgot how comforting it could be to hear another person's breath near me. Manik often sat by the window with his books. He liked to read while the tailors worked. He said the sound of the machines helped him think. I did not understand how noise could help someone study, but he said it reminded him of home. His home was in the mountains, where the wind always made a sound like whispering through the trees. He missed that sound, and perhaps the rhythm of the machines gave him a memory of it. At first, I tried to keep my distance. I told myself they were only workers and a tenant. But slowly that wall began to break. One evening, when the electricity went out, we all sat together by candlelight. Ishvar spoke about his childhood, about how he learned tailoring from his uncle, who once made clothes for rich families. Om was young, full of jokes and dreams. He said he wanted to open a shop one day and have his name painted in big letters on the door. I listened quietly. I did not say much, but I felt something gentle rising in me, something I had not felt for a long time. The days were long, but they did not feel empty anymore. Sometimes I went to the market with Om to buy fabric. The shopkeepers laughed and said, "A woman running a tailoring business, how strange." I ignored them and kept walking. Ishvar and Om treated me with respect, and I knew they worked hard because they cared about keeping our small world alive. Manik helped me with accounts and fixed small things in the flat. He said he liked to feel useful. But even in the middle of this quiet life, trouble was growing outside. The government was making new laws. Poor people were being taken from the streets. They said it was to clean the city and build better homes. But I knew that poor people were not the ones who built fear. They were the ones who suffered from it. One morning, Ishvar came late. His face was tired, and his eyes looked dark. He said the police had taken people from their street during the night. The slum where his friends lived was gone by morning. Everything had been destroyed. He said they were told it was for the city's progress. I did not know what to say. I made him tea and told him to rest before starting work. He thanked me, but his hands shook while he drank. That night I could not sleep. I thought about how easy it was for someone's life to disappear. A home that took years to build could vanish in one night, and the world would go on as if nothing had happened. The next week, the landlord came to my flat. He looked around with cold eyes and said that the rent was going up again. I tried to argue, but he said if I did not agree, he would give the room to someone else. I felt anger burning inside me. It was not fair. But in the city, fairness was a dream only the rich could afford. I agreed because I had no choice. After he left, I sat on the floor and felt tears come to my eyes. Ishvar came and quietly placed a cup of tea near me. He did not say anything, but his kindness said enough. Sometimes I wondered how we managed to keep going. Food was expensive, cloth was costly, and orders were fewer each month. But somehow, every evening, the tailors finished their work and we ate together. I cooked rice and lentils, and they brought small vegetables from the market. Manik helped clean the table and washed the cups. Those small things felt like victories. In a city filled with noise and pain, our table was a small island of care. When I looked at Om and Ishvar, I thought of the balance that life demanded. They had seen cruelty, but they still found ways to smile. Manik was different. He often looked sad, as if the city frightened him. He told me he missed his parents and his village. He missed the sound of the mountains and the smell of fresh snow. He said he did not like the city's smell of oil and garbage. I told him that one day he would finish his studies and go home again. He nodded, but I could see he was not sure. I began to notice how the city was changing. The streets were full of posters and soldiers. The news spoke of progress, but the faces in the markets told another story. People whispered about forced work camps, about men being taken away for speaking against the government. Every day, I thanked life for letting my little flat survive another sunrise. I did not believe in luck, but perhaps we had a little of it left. Then one afternoon, something happened that reminded me how fragile our balance was. A government inspector came to my building. He said small workshops were illegal without a license. He said I could be fined or even arrested. I tried to explain that we were not a factory, only a few people trying to survive. He did not care. He wrote something on a paper and told me he would return soon. My hand shook after he left. I felt the ground move under my feet. That evening, the tailors were quiet. We worked in silence until late. Then Ishvar said softly that maybe they should go for a while, so I would not get into trouble. I told them not to go, but they said they would come early in the morning to collect their things. When they left that night, the room felt empty again. I sat alone in the dark, listening to the city. I remembered Rustam and the quiet after his death. I thought I had learned to live with loneliness, but this new silence felt even heavier. The next morning, I woke early and waited. Hours passed. Then I heard footsteps in the corridor. I opened the door and saw them standing there with their sewing machines. Ishvar smiled and said they could not find work anywhere else. He said they would rather work with me, even if the risk was high. I laughed, though my eyes filled with tears. I told them to come in. That day, the sound of sewing began again, stronger than before. Manik came home that evening and smiled when he saw the tailors back at work. He said the flat felt alive again. I agreed. Life in the city was cruel, but sometimes small kindnesses were enough to keep people standing. Days passed and we worked quietly, careful not to attract attention. The inspector never returned. The landlord still asked for more rent, but I found ways to manage. I began to believe that maybe we could survive. But every time I looked out of the window, I saw something that reminded me of how thin our safety was. There were beggars sleeping on the sidewalks, children searching for food in the garbage, women waiting outside hospitals with sick babies. It was hard to believe that this was progress. One night, when everyone was asleep, I sat by the window and looked at the streetlights. The world outside was broken, but inside our little flat, there was warmth. I realized then that balance was not about wealth or comfort. It was about holding on when life wanted to push you down. It was about sharing pain so it felt lighter. It was about believing that kindness still mattered, even when everything else was falling apart. I did not know what the next day would bring. Perhaps more trouble, perhaps more loss. But I knew that as long as the machines kept stitching and the tea kept boiling, we would keep going. That thought helped me close my eyes and sleep. The sound of the machines echoed softly in my mind, like a promise that life, though unfair, could still continue with a little courage and care. Life moved quietly for some months after that. Our small world inside the flat seemed safe again, but I could feel that the city outside was changing faster than we could breathe. Sometimes the air itself felt tense, as if people were holding their fear inside their lungs. There were new posters everywhere, with bright faces and promises that no one believed anymore. Inside my home, the tailors worked from morning till evening. The sound of their sewing machines became like a clock. It told me time was still moving, that we were still here. Manik studied less these days. He said college felt meaningless. He spent more time sitting near the window, watching the street. I understood his silence. He was young, but he had already seen how unfair the world could be. One afternoon, I went to buy groceries and found the streets full of soldiers. They were forcing poor people into trucks. Some of them were crying. Some looked too tired even to shout. The soldiers said it was for a new housing plan. I saw women holding babies, their eyes empty. I turned away and walked home as fast as I could. That night, I could not eat. I sat by the window, listening to the rain. I thought about how close we all were to losing everything. The next morning, Ishvar told me their old neighborhood had been destroyed. The place where they had once lived was now a flat ground of stones and dirt. I watched them work in silence. Their faces were calm, but their eyes were full of loss. Later that evening, when they were leaving, I gave them extra food to take with them. I did not say why. I knew pride was all they had left, and I did not want to hurt it. A few days later, the landlord came again. He said the building would soon be redeveloped. He wanted me to leave before the month ended. I begged for more time, but he refused. That night, I sat on my bed and looked around my room. Every object, every wall held memories. This had been my life since Rustum's death. I felt a wave of fear. I had fought so hard to stand on my own, and now I was about to lose even this small space. When I told the others, they were quiet. Manik said he would go home for the holidays and try to find another place later. Ishvar and Om said they would continue to work wherever they could. I nodded, but inside I was breaking. Our little family was ending, and there was nothing I could do. Before leaving, Manik gave me a small tin box. Inside were tea leaves from his home in the mountains. He said they had a special smell of rain and earth. I kept the box in my kitchen and opened it often just to feel that soft scent. It reminded me of peace. After he left, the flat felt emptier. The tailors still came, but even they seemed quieter now. One morning, they did not come at all. I waited for hours. Then someone from the market told me the police had taken many men from the nearby streets. They said it was for a work program. I went to the police station, but they told me nothing. For many weeks, I heard nothing about Ishvar or Om. The room was silent, and I felt as if the air itself had stopped moving. When the emergency finally ended, the newspapers wrote about freedom and change. But for me, freedom felt like a cruel joke. The people who had suffered were forgotten. Months later, I heard that Ishvar and Om had returned to the city. I waited for them to come, but when they arrived, I almost did not recognize them. Ishvar was weak and walked with difficulty. Om looked thin and broken. Their eyes carried a pain that words could never explain. They told me they had been sent to a work camp. They said the men there were beaten and starved. Om had fallen ill, and Ishvar had taken care of him. When the camp finally closed, they had nowhere to go. They tried to find work, but the world had changed. No one wanted tailors anymore. Machines had taken over. I wanted to help, but I could barely feed myself. I let them stay for a while, even though the landlord warned me not to. I cooked simple meals, and we ate together again, though the food was little. It felt strange to see how time had turned strong men into shadows. Sometimes I thought about how easy it was for life to crush people who wanted only to live honestly. One morning, I saw Ishvar sitting near the window, looking at the street. The light touched his face, and I saw tears in his eyes. He said softly that life was unfair, but that he was grateful for small kindness. I felt tears in my eyes, too. After he left that day, I sat alone and thought about everything we had shared. Work, food, laughter, fear. We had built a tiny world out of almost nothing. And now, even that was falling apart. A few months later, they left the city again. I never saw them after that. I heard from someone that they had gone back to their village. I often wondered if they survived. I wanted to believe that they did, that somewhere they found a little peace. Manik returned years later. He had changed. His hair was longer and his face was tired. He told me he had been working far away, trying to find something better. But the world had disappointed him too. He looked around my room and smiled sadly. The sewing machines were gone, and I was sewing alone again. I could see he was trying to understand what had happened to us all. I made tea for him with the last of the leaves he had once given me. We sat in silence. I wanted to tell him everything, but I could not find the words. Sometimes pain becomes too big for language. When he left, he hugged me quietly. I watched him walk away through the crowded street, and I knew I would never see him again. Later, I heard news that broke my heart. He had taken his own life. After that, I worked without speaking to anyone for days. I sewed until my fingers hurt, until my eyes burned from the light. The room that had once been full of laughter now felt like a shell. I kept the sewing machines as long as I could, but when the landlord finally threw me out, I had to leave them behind. Now, I live with my brother again. His house is clean and cold. He says I should be grateful that he took me in. I nod and say nothing. But every night, when everyone is asleep, I think about that small flat, about the 3 men who shared my life for a short time. I remember Ishvar's gentle smile, Om's laughter, and Manek's quiet eyes. They were not family by blood, but they were family by heart. Sometimes when I close my eyes, I hear the sound of the sewing machines again. It comes to me like a memory of rain. The rhythm is steady, calm, and human. It reminds me that even in the hardest times, people can still find warmth in each other. We were poor, lonely, and afraid, but we shared what little we had. That was our fine balance. The city still moves outside my window. People still run, work, and dream. New buildings rise where old ones fell. Life continues as if nothing happened. But I know that every life carries its own story of struggle. I know that strength is not in loudness, but in endurance. It is in waking up every morning and trying again, even when your heart feels too heavy to lift. I often open the small tin box of tea leaves that Manek gave me long ago. The smell is faint now, almost gone. But when I breathe it in, I feel close to the past. I remember who I was, and who we all were, in that small flat by the noisy street. I remember the kindness that held us together. Some nights I sit by the window and think that life is a strange cloth. It tears easily, but it can also be mended with patience. The threads may never be perfect, but they can still hold. That, I believe, is what keeps the world from falling apart. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.